Hello, and welcome to Generation AI, where we demystify artificial intelligence, aka AI, through the lens of higher education. I'm your host, Ardis, Kadiu, and with me today from Turkey, I have Mr. or Dr. JC Bonilla. Hey, JC.
Yeah, you better call me doctor. Hi, everybody.
Doctor.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you, Ardis. Not that I have not seen you in the past 24 hours, but it's always good to see you in this context. Lovely here, summer vibes, Aegean coast, with a super interesting topic.
You mean Aegean coast? The Aegean coast or the agent? Like as in AI agents or Aegean?
Well, just, I'm keeping it consistent with my accent. So what am I saying? Aegean, agent, I don't know.
It just blends together.
Yeah.
I hear you don't get good whiskey there.
I've been struggling. Is this the podcast where we demystify spirits? I did have that. Like 4 weeks ago when we came back from Mexico. But yes, not my repertoire of whiskey. You get the traditional Johnny Walker, Black Label, and whatnot. But it's just the taxing on this type of spirits is so high that it's not even worth it. So looking forward to being back in New York a week from next week, and yeah, doing the Japanese whiskey repertoire that you know me, that I love, right? So me miss some Japanese whiskey.
I love it. I love it. Well, everybody, today we have an interesting episode, and it's back to school season. And one of the things that we wanted to tackle today was kind of this idea of AI deployments and AI ROI in institutions and also organizations as well. A new MIT report came out, and it's really interesting that they found 95% of GenAI pilots are failing to deliver measurable P&L impact or financial returns, which is mind-boggling because this is something that's near and dear to us in terms of our us pushing AI to make a big difference in terms of the ROI. What's really interesting about the report is also we can go through it, but only 5% of those pilots achieve rapid revenue growth. The report also says that 90% are employee use is personal. They use personal AI tools versus very low enterprise subscriptions. So what they're calling the shadow AI, right? And we're seeing here at Element, right? We're seeing it at Element.
I was just gonna go and say I was holding to this, but Element is not part of the survey whatsoever, right, Ardis?
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Yeah. We don't. We're gonna have a lot of mirrors with Element, or we can kind of talk a little bit because this hits home a little bit. So the whole topic today is all about adoption or AI impact and ROI in organizations, and kind of what are we seeing? Is it the early days? Is it not? What are we seeing? Like, have we kind of come through the other end, or like the easy picking, so to speak, right? The low hanging fruit on personal AI, writing things like that, and now we're getting into the more complex workflows. What's happening, and how should institutional leaders think about it? Right. One of the things that the report was also mentioning is the success rate for internal build AI is 33%. Whereas vendor purchase tools, they succeed 67% of the time. So it's more than double the success rate for buying a tool versus building it internally. And we'll kind of extrapolate that a little bit more what that means. But, let's just jump right into it, Jesse. What do you think about that?
As I said, it doesn't mirror Element on Fridays, but it mirrors Element Monday through Thursday, right? This data, it's predictable in the sense that when new technologies like AI that are promising, fast-paced, right? You throw things at the wall, and sometimes you see what sticks. I've saw exactly similar type of results when data science came about, big data came about, and many of us went in that direction and like, okay, what's happening? So I'm not surprised to see that. The part that is different and the part that is really, really interesting is that what we know is that the adoption of these techniques are so globalized, so standardized that mom and pop type of organizations, consumers are doing the AI thing. So it's a totally different type of adoption. Second point, it's hard to get AI that sticks. It is easy to do pilots. And I think you and I are going to have this conversation throughout because as my CEO, aka boss, JC, stop doing pilots, do or projects, let's make these into products. My work for that is AI workflow coverage. So what happens here is that the pressure between, AI is making progress here, but the orchestration of something end to end, a workflow, it's a totally different ballgame. And this is basically what that 5% that is probably succeeding. Last point, I love this data point. Why? Because it's in a way self-serving. But I love this data point that vendor purchase succeeds at a higher rate than internal tools. Why? Because we truly believe that vertical solutions, in other words, AI that is customized for healthcare by healthcare providers or healthcare experts. In our case, higher education by Element. If you have a CrossFit gym and it comes from an athletic sports analytics type of vendor, those type of AI deployments do better on average.
Right.
Verticalization wins, and the data suggests that.
But this is not necessarily about verticalization. This is about internal. So people who are internal to the organizations, they're supposed to know their workflows better than anybody else, but they're failing to actually build AI solutions to deploy them in the enterprise. So what this means is, for me at least, is that there is AI should be treated as a product, right? Or it's not a project that an IT team can do. You can't deploy. It's not like putting together this project that IT can deploy. It's more of a product component. So you don't have a lot of those people internally. You don't have people that can translate requirements into workflows and then think very differently around AI and how those get deployed. The other part is, what we're seeing here, and I want to go back to the enterprise deployments and how people should think about it. But what we're seeing is that 90% of employees use personal AI tools, which means that
we saw that element.
Right. It's very different from other technologies, like you mentioned, big data. Well, guess what? As a consumer, I couldn't get into big data because, first of all, I needed to have big data. Like our Excel spreadsheets were not that big. But second of all, you needed specialized tools in order to use big data. You needed Python, you needed R, you needed all these different things. So the comparison is a little bit different because with AI, consumers came first. The consumer tools, ChatGPT became available for everybody first, which is the latest models and everything. So consumers starting to use it, and then they brought it to work and said, hey, I'm going to bring this thing. So it was a bottoms up, kind of adoption.
And to my point before. That's why this is different. We haven't seen these we haven't seen these. I haven't seen this personally in a long time.
Right. So the shadow AI right now people have been using it for a number of different years, and some of them more than others. But it's not translating into productivity, or it's not translating into ROI for a lot of larger organizations because they can't measure it. They don't know how to embed it into their workflows, and it's not making that big impact that people thought it was going to make just because of the adoption part of it. I mean, an Element, right? You're the AI, you're the head of AI and kind of in charge of the AI ops team. Let's talk about what are we doing? How are we thinking about it?
So we are very close to these stats in that if I launched 10 different projects, right, 9 of them feel like POCs, side projects, if you will, where custom GPTs from someone's private account, it's running XYZ interesting things. There's no replicability, but it's moving the needle on one thing, but not the other. What is one thing that is moving the needle, as I see it on Element? That it gets AI maturity and literacy up and running, and people speak about it, and they're cool, shiny demos, if you will. But what is that happening that, 10% or 5%, depending on the data, right, is the business impact. It's hard to do AI projects today as side projects, right, where business impact emerges organically. And this is the part that I would say at Element, it's starting to be different. Stage one, do a ton of these type of demos, right? Get literacy in AI, Vive up and running. The demos are fantastic. But there's a point of enough of this, let's start doing this ROI type of projects, but the business impact, the use case needs to lead, and then the AI solution comes in later. That bottom-up approach that you mentioned, which is how AI has become a consumer staple, it's what is dominating AI to the Element. And it's hard mental shift of this is what we're trying to change and the impact that we're trying to address and reverse engineer. The example that I will give that actually comes from you a few weeks ago when we were chatting is like, think about we hire 100 people just to solve a problem, right? And they solve the problem. How would they do it? And revert back on how AI can do that, right? And it's a really interesting approach of how, okay, this is the business impact I want to achieve. Throw everything that I have that is not AI, assume that you get done.
Yeah, the old adage is like, don't automate, just do it with people first and then automate later, right?
100%, right? And so the measurement, it's a very classical problem of measurement, right? That these projects are launched without the key measurement of impact or how it gets shaped to the use case that drives the impact. And as such, they just create, interesting demos, but how they stick to impact lift, bottom line, it's part of the thing that is missing. At Element, it's a mind shift on people. The second thing I will tell you, Ardis, when I look at my developers, right, my experts to do these projects, they come in as AI experts. And you and I spoke about this as they just need to be deeper into the problem. So what you end up with is,
yes,
we end up with a partnership of, I know my chat GPT prompting, but you, John, you are the expert in sales or in marketing or in customer success. So you tell me all the problems, but we're co-leading. So these AI experts need to start basically becoming domain experts and do the problem discovery in a different level. Else, you're gonna end up with very flat solutions that are on the side of demos, as opposed to the lift that we think we can provide. So that's how I see it at Element and how it connects to this data.
Yeah, it's the old adage is like, hey, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And then it's the same thing here. It's like, hey, I can do that prompting for you, no problem. Just give me some of the data, I'll do the prompt. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. It's like you need to understand like what the customer is looking for. Like we're going through what we're calling our QBR process, for example, right now, and we're going to call let's call it live, right? Let's call it one of the projects. And the issue with QBRs, which I don't know if everybody knows what they stand for.
Everybody, this is a sensitive topic, by the way. So if you see me crying or like unemotional, just know that it's
just a use case. It's a use case.
It's been going. All right. So QBR, it stands for Quarterly Business Review.
Yeah, we can take other projects from our institutions or our customers, for example, at Element, and we can kind of go through this. But this is a really good example that so quarterly business review, and we have all the customer data, we have all the usage data. We have things that are all around, how many emails you're sending, how open rates, how good campaigns are, how many messages, how many applications, events. So we have all these different insights and all these different stats and data and everything else. And when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, I need a quarterly business review to understand, so I can reach out or we can do a review with a partner at Element, and we can discuss, hey, here's how you're using the product. Here's how you're leveraging it. Give you a status quo of it. And then here is how, here's the best playbooks on techniques that we think you should be using. And here's the opportunities and to get from point A to where you are today to point B, where future state is with its best practices and techniques. Very, very, very simple, right? And the opportunity here is, well, we want to use more of the product because that's really good for you because you get better ROI, but also it's very sticky and you get better return, and it's really good for Element because we increase usage and so on and so forth. So it's good for everybody. But what we have started is we start with not defining what is a really good instance or what does a really good deployment of CRM look like. We started with, and the team, it was an AI problem. We started with the analytics. It's like, let's just interpret the analytics and then give them a report of that in a word-based format. So that's different from understanding what the problem is and saying, as an expert, I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at everything that you have and I'm going to make recommendations on where you can improve. It's like, well, wait a minute. Like, how do you do that? How does an expert do that? You have to extract, you have to do interviews with the expert. You have to talk about, okay, how do you interpret, these types of events? What's the show rates? Are you doing, your sequences? Do they have multi-steps? Do they talk about these topics? So those are all things that an expert naturally will look at. But when you think about an AI expert, they don't know the process. They don't know what's effective or whatever. So they're going to look at the data and they're going to just try to interpret that. So this is a really good example for our QBR process where things haven't accelerated and we keep going back and back again and there's still pieces missing. But I don't know what your thoughts are. From my perspective, we're still missing that, that inside knowledge of how do you actually understand the problem and how do you, look at it as an expert.
So a QBR, for context, everybody, and then I'll address your point, right? It's this activity that you do it quarterly, right? And it's a retrospective, right? And it takes hours to prepare for. And when you produce it, if it's done well, the client gets all this insight, your partner is really lifted up. And then you do it again, it's highly unlikely that it will be the same, right? Because it's just the muscle that you exercise, how you interpret the data and whatnot. So it's a great problem for AI. To your question on how do I interpret this? And this is where it's a really interesting AI problem to solve. We know that. But there's the philosophy of how AI becomes more effective. You're absolutely right that AI is fantastic at this is what good looks like, right? So we could have created a really good one template and then find me 200 versions of this for everybody once you have your data infrastructure. Or what you said is the data analytics point of view is we don't know what good is. So we basically start creating, and AI is really good at this as well, right? Look at all the patterns, look at all the connections, kind of signal 5-7 things that are interesting. And we'll take that into a type of report that could look really good and iterate, right? So there's a philosophy of I know what good is, and you let AI scale that, or you let AI find the patterns, find some of that metrics of success in a way,
right?
And then you iterate.
Well, I could tell you the latter is not ideal. So like AI doesn't really find the patterns of success across. You really need the expertise to document the best practices or all of these things, and AI can replicate things especially generative AI and agentic AI. Like you need to bake in those things into these agents. That's why you said vertical agents and vertical AI is really good because you know what the verticalization, you know the workflow, and then you bake that in. Whereas if it's generic, it's like you can do anything, but somebody has to come in and configure and put the Lego bricks together to do the anything. So, the AI is not going to find the patterns, right? This is like old AI. We're talking about ML, where you look at signals and there's just not possible anymore, because these agentic systems are all about producing content and producing human intelligence work, right? You can certainly tell it to look at different things and say, okay, how can this be better based on best practices, and here's that rubric of how you go about it. But it's not going to do that instinctively if you haven't built that pattern or that workflow into it.
So vertical solutions where the expert comes in and says, this is good, right? And then just basically tell me how far I am from this or how close I am, and opportunities to basically get to this North Star. AI is fantastic. I do think AI continues to be good at finding patterns. The part that I do agree with you is, and I'm going to give you a different analogy, right? If I expose x-rays and medical records, right? I'm not an expert, but I want to know how healthy I am, right? I can AI my way through a proxy of health versus here's a cardiologist who actually is looking at my labs for heart health, and she can come and say, these are the 5 things that we're looking for, a male, 48, Hispanic, blah, 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 and extract them, right? So what is happening in these two is that one, it's good enough. The other one, it's expertise to the next level, knowing what good, really good means. And I think this is where vertical solution and your push has been. We just understand how AI can take us there because we understand North Stars. And to generalizing the conversation, I truly believe there's space for both of them. I believe that there's going to be solutions when we start thinking about AI projects that sometimes you, the user, you don't know exactly where you need to go, and AI can get you there. It's me evaluating my own labs versus what we just spoke on the QBR. The perfect way to QBR is understanding a rubric of success and running 300 and plus clients against a rubric of success and understanding the deltas, right? And what has happened in those two, it's the power of expertise, verticalization, versus the power of generalized knowledge. And I think AI and AI projects, depending on where you're at, could have impact in both of them.
Right. And so taking this then to the areas where, like, what's been really successful for us, and the report actually says that the budgets are, that MIT report is saying that the budgets are going 50% plus, or over 50% of the budgets are on sales and marketing. But so people are saying, look, this should be really good for sales and marketing. Right? It's like AI is great for sales and marketing, producing content, all of these different things, which is amazing. And they're doing all these projects internally to do that, because you can wire some content together and you can do it, which is good. But the highest ROI is back office automation.
Exactly.
So hence, what you're seeing is that the marketing and sales AI tooling or the things that you're using, and in the case of higher education, that falls into you're writing emails so people are using ChatGPT, or they're using some kind of general assistant, because they're like, oh, I did this email so much better now that I did it yesterday. I did this thing so much better. Meanwhile, they're still spending 2 hours reviewing a transcript, or they're still spending like 10, 20 minutes or 10 minutes reviewing an application for fraud, or they're spending 2 hours reading an application, right? But that gain that they have, maybe 5 minutes on writing an email, it feels very good because they're able to use this general AI and kind of convert it and say, oh, I'm so much better at this now. Whereas with the other back office workflows, it's either it works or it doesn't work. There is no improvement. There is no in between. So when you take and you do fraud, like, you either have AI do it and it works, or you do it by human. So that's the part that's really interesting, when you're looking at implementing AI or adopting AI in your institutions or in even in Element, you're either transforming a back office operation and automating the whole thing, and that's working and that delivers real value, versus this shadow AI or people bringing their own AI and they're using it for productivity components like writing emails and creating content, and that's where people are thinking and they're deploying most of the money is in the marketing and sales. We're looking at it from our own side too, right? It's like, if you think about it, like we're deploying ChatGPT and we're using even Google Gemini internally and we have access to it, but everybody's using it very differently. So I have no idea if somebody that comes in, let's say one of our university partnership managers that is working with an institution, to reach out to them, like how much better are they with AI versus without AI? Like how much more effective are they? I don't know. I can't measure that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like when people look at their counselors too, or when they look at the workflows that counselors are doing or marketing teams are doing on the institution side, it's the same exact thing. It's like, are they using AI to just write emails, or are they using AI to basically, let these agents handle the whole workflow? And that's where you see the differences in how schools are thinking about it.
So let me summarize it, because what I think is a good segue is to solutions and how do we start moving here. But data suggests that the majority of the AI attempts, projects, pilots, right, are not bringing that impact, and quantifying that at about 95%, quoting as failure because there's no business impact. We, as an organization, internally experience something similar. I would not say it's 95, but it's the majority of the projects don't make it there. And it is not because the technology is weak, right? Your last comment, when we produced, meaning AI, the technology is weak, right? So it's just, it's how the projects are being shaped on that. We produce technology that is AI, kind of, first level, probably the most advanced AI for higher education. And we see our clients, to your point, probably not succeeding at the same level, not because our technology is weak, but there's something there in how these projects get moved forward, how the human component and design makes this AI project successful. And this is a really good conversation. Today at Element, internally, we call them AI ops, right? Operations in AI. In universities, you may be calling something else. But today we have been looking at this body of work called the Forward Deployed Engineer, FDE, as one of the operational models and deployments of humans that could really start moving the needle on impactful AI. So should we move into what an FDE is all about?
Yeah. So look, when people put AI under this big umbrella, and it kind of gets normalized. Mm-hmm. And you have large language models, which is AI, and it's the foundational models. But then what you build on top of that, you have agents and you have agentic workflows. They get built on top of that. They can handle very complex things. So at Element, we're building AI agents, which take whole workflows and basically automate those workflows for people. They handle, responses to students. They handle outreach to students. They handle support. They handle application review, fraud detection, all of the things that are needed to kind of replace whole workflows. And when you look at that, it's very difficult for someone in our institution or to look at this foundational technology and say, oh, I want to go from just this idea of an API or an AI like a ChatGPT that goes back and forth, or maybe some general technology, obviously like OpenAI and things like that, to deploy it and build all of my workflows and replace it. It's a huge gap in between. And we're seeing it from the report that a lot of those projects are failing because they don't know how to build those products. They don't know the product development, which requires the workflow management and requires the understanding of how this workflow. So the idea is, or the recommendation for the report is, just buy something that's already off the shelf meaning that, that fits your workflow. So like Element 451, for example, don't build your own agent, or don't try to build your own chatbot, or build something that's, just buy Element, and then it's going to replace. Don't do your own application review, and don't do your own kind of outreach, through just your own sequences and things like that. Just buy Element. It'll handle that stuff for you. It's AI forward, and you'll do that. But when you think about then, even Element, it still needs the deployment of those workflows into your organization, right? And it's not similar to the same piece of software where you just configure a couple of things, right? You have to basically write job descriptions for these agents. You have to write playbooks for these agents to accomplish something that a human would. So when you bring in counselors, you train them, and how good your training program is, and how good your marketing program is. It's how successful, you're going to be. Like if you know, and you got everything packed in terms of, this is what we do. We have these events, we do this outreach, we have great writing, all of these different things. Now, when you bring in agents to automate this, you still need to bring those workflows that are internal to you and give that work to agents. You still have to write the rubrics. You still have to write, kind of the job descriptions. So this is where, but then if you're building even more things, like with more generic solutions, like for example, Zapier or some of these platforms, or Lindy.ai, which are automation platforms, but you can build anything. Now you need even more, like it's even more confusing, right? Because now you have to not only bring everything to higher ed because they're very generic, but you also have to kind of understand how the sausage is made, and in terms of bringing data in and bringing context in. And we had a conversation about context that's very, very important. Context is king, so to speak, in agents. So then it becomes a huge gap. So this is where the consulting business, or consultants, or experts that we just talked about, right, in this job, become very, very popular. So experts that know your workflow, and experts that understand the AI and technology, can come in and now translate your process into this agentic workflows, and can translate a process and actually build them really, really quickly in the tool. So when we at Element, I mean, obviously this, right? But that's the framework that we're talking about here. It's this notion that you need an expert that understands your process, and the same expert understands the tools that you're using. So they're experts in those tools as well, or technology. Does that make sense?
100%. When I look at so I really love the framing that you brought it up, and how these challenges, in a way, lead to a human function called the consultant. And that consultative type of behavior makes these projects succeed at a higher rate. Why are consultants successful? In a really crude way, consultants are fantastic at a soft landing between technology, people, and process. Let me remove technology here, because that's what we're talking about. AI, agents, so the technology is here. And they will thrive, this technology thrives with context. And that context is the people and the process, right? So either asking the questions or understanding what the process is. Ardis, many of our partners today, and I alluded to this in my team, right, as well. When we work with clients, our people don't even understand the process, right? They do it sometimes, but they just don't know how to articulate it. So it's a really interesting deployment of a human who's going to be able to have this. I just don't ship code, right, or bells and whistles of features. They ship outcomes, and these type of engineers, right, they're forward deployed. They bridge the distance between the technology and that context.
Yeah. So what I want to say, so let's move on, because everybody understands consultants, right? You hire a marketing agency, or you hire let's say an EAB or an RNL or a Carnegie or whatever, they're coming and say, hey, we're enrollment consultants, like we know, or enrollment specialists. But behind the scenes, they're putting together a plan for you, and then behind the scenes, they're handing that stuff off to somebody else to do the writing, somebody else to do the CRM deployment, somebody else to do whatever, right?
Rate card management.
Right, exactly. So it's an agency model where they're doing all these things behind the scenes. And then you know, 5 weeks later, you get a report. It's like, is it working, not working? 5 weeks later. So like the iteration part is not there. What we're talking about is the consultant is, you know, they're usually subject matter experts, but they're not technologists. They are not the people who are actually doing the work and deploying the technology and the AI. So in the AI world, you need somebody to be a specialist in the technology, and they're the ones who can work hand in hand with you. So you don't get the account managers, but you get the actual person who's hitting the buttons and clicking things and actually building the workflows and working embedded. It's embedded with the institution, or it's embedded in the organization. So those are called the forward deploy engineers, because they're technical people that understand the product, they understand the technology extremely well, and they're embedded, they're forward deployed in your organization. And they're building the workflows with you, and they're deploying the product, and they're very knowledgeable on how that technology works, and they're translating your requirements, and they're translating your business into, you know, this product. And the iteration process is very, very fast, because there's not a lot of layers in between. And this is a model that it's got, like, the naming has become very popular from Palantir. I don't know if you know Palantir, which is one of the big GovTech contractors. They've been, you know, they deploy a lot of AI systems. However, what's happening is that other companies like OpenAI, which has foundational technology, they said, we're going to do the same thing, but if an organization is buying more than like $10 million worth of OpenAI doing business as an enterprise, we're going to deploy a forward engineer with you, so they can work with you to do things like that specialization, right? So basically specialize these models for your organization and so on and so forth. Like, they're fine tuning the models with you. They're working closely with you. They're bringing the data. They're helping you understand how, you know, to accelerate this. So I kind of like that model a lot, but colleges and universities, they're not buying, you know, this you know, very sophisticated AI systems, right? They're buying, you know, software that's supposed to work out of the box, like Element for agents, for example, but there's still a big gap. There's a huge gap between what they, you know, how the software works and what the software is capable of, and how they configure it, and how they basically write the job descriptions and tell these agents what to do, right? Their process, their internal process, write the rubrics and so on. So there's this gap right now.
Of course, the framework, it's literally what we need, right? And from a technology point of view, the short and sweet is the technology is ready to go off the shelf, but it requires fine tuning, right? And maybe integrations, how you bring your governance, your ethics, and how do you make it specifically fit to you. Forward deployed engineer, right? This type of perfect hybrid. Is she here an unicorn, Ardis? It's so hard sometimes to find these people who get the business context, they're able to understand the technical, and now we go to the next level. Because I know many people who get the context and the technology, but the language of, I am a technologist, so I'm big in the FDE, I'm big engineer, so I speak technical. So when I speak to my business people, it goes over my head, or vice versa. I come from the business strategy point of view, and I just don't have the language to translate the technical. So these perfect unicorns are translators, but they are in scarcity in my experience. Where do you settle with the unicorn component and the availability of these professionals? Because it's fantastic. We need them. It's just how can you groom them, and how do you scale the availability of them in terms of numbers and volume?
Yeah. Well, the issue that we have right now is that those people that are deploying AI, like because it's so new, there's not a lot of them out there, right? So you have the old agency world. So you have a lot of folks who are working on the agencies right now. They can be content. They're usually very specialized. They're content strategists or they're web developers or whatever it is. But you don't have AI specialists or you don't have AI operations specialist for higher ed. Like that title doesn't exist right now. It should. So we should really think about, or agencies or these consultants should really think about training those people internally to understand and to actually use the technology. So how can they be replicable or how can they be like, let's take Element, for example. The largest concentration of these people is probably in the companies that are building the AI itself. So because we understand the problem, because we're building the workflows, we understand, the technology, and then we understand how to deploy to you. The biggest problem is that there's just not enough of those people, right? And we just don't have enough, internal people that we can say, hey, let's say Lindsay, let's have Lindsay work with customer or with school A for 3 months to actually, build and launch this project for them. We just don't have the people to do that. So we have to be very careful in how much time we dedicate and how we automate the deployment process, because we can get a school like from 0 to 100 in just a couple of months. We just don't have the team to dedicate fully to that customer. So what ends up happening is that the work is split between internal people and to Element and then to the school. But there's a lot of places where the agencies and the consultants have a huge opportunity to come in and make a big impact now because they need to change their business model. It's not about writing content or producing campaigns anymore. It's all about how do you take internal processes and automate them with AI and build them into agentic AI. And that AI can be, off the shelf, right? Like Element, for example, and bring all your platform in there. Or it can be maybe other automations that you need to attach next to it, right? You can build a few things with Zapier, for example, or you can use N8N to kind of connect some data sources for them. So those are the things that we need to evolve to. And my recommendation to colleges is try to look for those innovative agencies or companies that are coming in and are doing this kind of work today, because they're going to get you so much more value than a big guy or who is kind of doing more of the same, right? And the pricing is pretty high. So that's kind of the recommendation here.
The movement from AI maturity and AI literacy that thrives with demos and projects and prompts throughout, right? It's a top-down approach. So the first one is AI has done wonderfully from a bottom-up. To succeed, start looking at this a top-down approach. Why? Because it needs to be resourced. This type of framework of bringing a consultancy, whether you call it a forward deployment engineer, whether you hired a consultancy who actually knows how to do that, whether you bring Element and we just do it, end to end for you, it requires a resourcing, right? So it's a really important component.
So you're saying you can't just give it to Tom or Sally in IT and then they're going to figure it out. You can't do that.
I at this moment, the time to value and the speed of iteration, it's so important. And what I put my money on is that Tom and Sally.
I was just being sarcastic, but yes, I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, and Tom and Sally in IT are the best at IT, but IT finance, IT HR, IT enrollment management, and so on and so forth, we know how that's being played out, right? So look at the iteration.
They don't know IT and AI like that.
Exactly.
That's the part that
That's the part, right? But then to that point, this is the part that I find really interesting. When you bring this resource and you start doing these projects, bring John and Sally, these IT experts who are AI savvy or interest, right? And have them hang out in the project. The work that happens in AI workflow automation, it's very contagious. By being around and seeing it, it's replicable to 80% and 90%, right? So what I would say is top down, resource it, and make sure that your champions are part of the project so they can start basically doing some of these projects where the lift, it's easier, and you can start generating scale.
Agreed. I think that's really good. And if you have an opportunity based on the success rates that we're seeing, do not build internally. The success rate is more than double if you buy rather than you build. And the organizations that are, or those product companies are innovating a lot faster. They're going a lot faster. So just a couple of recommendations that we can provide around like how to think about the solutions and kind of what you're buying. There's just a lot of noise out there. Everybody promises. So like by this point, you should have the ability to understand ROI. So those companies, like they should have good use cases. You should have ROI. They should be able to provide that to you. Should be able to provide references. And then they should be able to actually, test the product and look at it and play with it and feel it and touch it. So all of those things are available by now. So, and also look for something that a company that has a very deep understanding of the vertical, have been around in the space and understand kind of the workflows for that, and have been building those part of workflows and have a very rich data model as part of that. Because if we remember, AI needs a lot of context, a lot of data, and that's very, very important in that space. So we talked about today, don't feel like you're behind. A lot of folks are failing at these projects. They're failing to deliver ROI, but the learning is probably still there. So they're not completely wasted. It's just a matter of, how everybody's starting to think about AI as an impact to the bottom line of the ROI versus AI being more of a productivity booster, individual productivity booster. So that's still happening, but now you need to look at it more seriously and start thinking about enterprise deployments of AI.
100%. Ardis, that last point is so important. Everybody, as you listen to this conversation, know the motions that the battle of AI is in multiple fronts. And a front of prompting to win, right? It's important. But this conversation that has played out in the past 45 minutes, it's where the advanced use case of AI is moving. And when the metric is AI workflow coverage that moves ROI, we start looking at things differently. So this conversation is in a way advanced, and it starts taking someone who has had some maturity and success with POCs to the next level. So see it that way, for sure. Very good conversation, Mr. Kadiu.
All right. I like it. Well, everybody, reach out to us, subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast, on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars and just reach out and let us know if, what other topics you want us to cover, or give us your feedback overall. So we appreciate you all. Until next time. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.